Member at our joint headquarters. Welcome to all members and officers who are here present. I know we've got a couple of people who are running late and will be with us soon. So we'll go straight into the first agenda item, which is apologies for absence.
Chair, we have apologies from Councillor Corden, who's unwell, and for predicted lateness, we have apologies for Councillor John O'Lee and John Clark.
Thank you. Item 2 then, first of all, we just need to deal with also, we've got a substitute, so I'm going to hand over to, an appointment, a new appointment rather than a substitute. I'm going to hand over to the clerk to explain.
It's to note that Nottingham City Council have appointed Councillor Jay Hayes to the authority in place of Councillor Goldcarn.
Thank you very much, Clerk. Item 2, you're welcome, Jay. Good to see you again. I know you've been part of the authority before, yes. So it's good to have you here. Item 2 then is declarations of interest. Any declarations of interest by any members or officers in relation to any items on the agenda? Mick?
Yeah, interest in agenda item number 7.
Thank you, Mick.
Chair,
Chief.
just in terms of the Principal Officer pay review, on behalf of the Principal Officer team, declaration of interest, but I don't believe in terms of guidance from the clerk there's a need for Principal Officers to leave the room at that point.
Thank you, Chief. And that particular item, which is item 9 on our agenda, will be introduced for that reason by the clerk as per normal. Any other declarations of interest? No. Item 3 then is minutes for our confirmation, of which there are 2 sets of minutes. So minutes of the meeting, I'll take the first set of minutes for the meeting held on the 14th of July. Any comments or questions in relation to those minutes? No. Are there any comments or questions in relation to the minutes for the meeting held on the 22nd of September, which is the second set of minutes? No. Colleagues happy to approve those minutes as a correct record? Yeah. Agreed? Agreed. Thank you, colleagues. Item 4 then is Chair's announcements. First of all, colleagues, you will see in front of you on the desk a white ribbon for each of you as members and for the Commissioner as well. We're proud, obviously, as a service to be signed up to, supportive of, fully endorse the aims and values of the White Ribbon campaign. Obviously, White Ribbon Day takes place on the 25th of November each year, and I want to say a particular thank you to Andy Macy, who's at the back of the room, who's led for the service. It's been a team effort, but Andy's led for the service in terms of ensuring that we're an accredited organisation and that we've really full swing behind what is a really important campaign to end men's violence against women and girls. And I know, likewise, Commissioner of the Police and your own office fully signed up to, as are our local authority partners across Nottingham and Nottinghamshire. A really important campaign. So there's a white ribbon there that people can wear with pride at the events that they attend and the formal meetings that they attend. But thank you again to Andy and thank you to the wider team in the service for the hard work and raising the profile of a very important issue. Just in terms of a couple of things, national announcements that are pertinent to the service and some more local announcements. This week the government published their reply to the sector reform white paper, which itself was published back in 2022. A copy is going to be being emailed to all members and to the Commissioner for awareness. I know some colleagues will have already had sight of it and for consideration. Some of the key areas of focus for the government are around people, governance and professionalism. There is clearly a focus at the moment on culture, given the Spotlight report and some of the other reports by His Majesty as the Inspectorate for Fire and Rescue Services and Constabularies. We're obviously working on that particular issue, but there are also some other issues being considered by the government around operational independence of chief fire officers and other issues that have been raised. It is proposed that the reply informs an authority debate for us to better understand future implications in terms of where the government goes on the response to the white paper. Also, some weeks ago, which was subject to a discussion in Fire Authority prior to the latest government statement on local authority funding, a letter was sent from ourselves to the Home Office, to Treasury and to DLUC to make the case for the council tax preset flexibility for fire and rescue services specifically of £5, subject to the issue of a draft settlement which should come before Christmas, so it'll probably be in the last week before Christmas, back end of next week. I think it's the 19th. As I understand, or around them. We are at the moment in a position where we understand from the government's policy statement they have made that we're not going to get the £5 flexibility. which is deeply frustrating and a massive missed opportunity. And I should just say at this juncture, you will see later in the medium-term financial plan paper that if there isn't a change of heart by the government by the end of next week, and I have already spoken to a number of the local Nottinghamshire MPs who are in agreement and are going to lobby on this issue, if there isn't a change of heart by the government, it leaves a significant gap in the medium-term financial plan. And I will be very clear at this stage that, you know, colleagues will know around the room that is likely to mean frontline service cuts back on the table. You know, we haven't got a magic money tree. We can't magic money from sources that we haven't got. Council tax isn't the only answer, and I understand obviously that families are feeling the pressure, but there's a very acute challenge for standalone fire services. We really welcomed what the government did last year, and I would welcome colleagues cross-party doing what they can in the next week to try and lobby around this particular issue, because we had a consensus on the budget last year. I was hoping we'd get to a consensus again politically on the budget for February, and I think that would at least alleviate some pressure in terms of risk to frontline services. So I'll leave that with colleagues, and if colleagues can have conversations, it will be very much appreciated. I will continue to have conversations over the coming week, and let's see whether we can try and get a change of heart. We had a brilliant awards ceremony on the 29th of October, and thank you to many of the Fire Authority members who came, and to the Commissioner who was there too, as well as obviously officers and the wider team. It was absolutely brilliant, and it really good to recognise the hard work, the outstanding achievements of people who work for Nottinghamshire Fire and Rescue Service, and indeed members of the public actually who've been involved in acts of bravery throughout the year. And just at this point, because I think it's pertinent to, on behalf of the whole authority, to say a happy Christmas. I wish a happy new year to everybody who works for Nottinghamshire Fire and Rescue Service, and to say a massive thank you for the hard work that they've done throughout 2023. It's been a challenging year. They do a very good job in difficult circumstances. Likewise to our other colleagues in the emergency services as well. We're really grateful for the work that's been done. There is an annual carol service which colleagues are aware of, I think, and have attended, which is a joint emergency service carol service, and it's at Sutherminster. All members are invited. I think you've had a note already. That's taking place on the 19th of December at 7 o'clock at Sutherminster, so if you can be there, please do come along. And I think that's everything in terms of Chair's announcements. Anybody want to raise any comments or questions at this point? No? Not seeing any indications. Our first substantive item on the agenda then is our medium-term financial strategy, which I've made brief reference to already, although it's a much more detailed paper. It doesn't just deal with preset levels, which covers the period 2024 to 25 to 2027-28, and the budget guidelines, crucially, for next year, which are well rehearsed and will be well known to colleagues. I'm going to hand over to, I think, a double act. I think, Mark, are you going to speak first? Also, sorry, remiss of me, before Mark speaks, it's later in the paper, I had a chance to say this in committee, but a huge thank you to Mark Kimberley, who is acting for us as interim treasurer to the authority at the moment, working alongside and supporting Tracy Stevenson, who's doing an absolutely brilliant job for us, leading on head of finance until Bev joins us, which obviously is later in the paper. So a huge thank you, Mark. Mark obviously works very closely with the Commissioner and colleagues in the police service, so that synergy is there, but also Mark was formerly our 151 officer at Gedlin, so I know him really well, and I'm massively grateful, Mark, for you standing in for us for, I think, a few months. So I'll hand over to Mark to introduce the paper.
Thank you. Well, I haven't had far to come today, so just across the way, so that was quite good. Mike's already said that we're unlikely to have a £5 increase at this moment from what we know from government. So all the core funding scenarios that we look at sort of suggest that there's going to be a deficit compared to our needs. Yeah, and unsurprisingly, that means that either we'll need some efficiencies, some service cuts, or alternative sources of funding. Predominantly in the public sector, that tends to focus on those first two efficiencies and service cuts, unfortunately. Included in the medium-term plan is to look at your reserve strategy. That shows that within your general fund reserve, there is some scope to help balance the budget, but it's very limited. And my advice on that would be that actually, because it's a limited amount of money, any investment from that reserve ought to be towards initiatives that deliver future efficiencies. There are a lot of uncertainties around, particularly around inflation, pay award, demand, You know, over a medium-term plan, we will have two looks at pensions across the piece, and that often is a challenge. You know, we're in a time where international events are affecting us, and particularly we're still not out of the issue with supply chain issues, particularly affecting vehicles, the construction industry, and IT. So I would suggest that things are becoming increasingly tight. I mean, I've been CFOs around for quite a long period of time now, probably best part of 25 years, and I would suggest that for most of the public sector, this current round of budgets is probably going to be the toughest that they've ever had. And I think you see that in the sector as a general, with the number of Section 114 notices being issued, and the issues that arise from that. And I don't think this authority is sort of is in any significantly different position. We start from a fairly robust financial position, so you know, we do have some options, but it is increasingly tight. I'd say the final figures obviously aren't through yet, and we'll do a final look at the budget, and then there will be some difficult decisions to be made, I would suggest. I think what I would advise members to be looking at is that during the next financial cycle, particularly once we've got a balanced budget, we need to be sort of developing our options in the future around efficiencies and reductions. I know we do that as a part of our strategy all the time, but I think that we need a particular focus on it. So that's what I would say in sort of as a general introduction. Yeah, all the good news there. And Tracy, I don't know if you've got anything you'd like to add.
I'll take you through some points within the medium-term financial strategy. As Mark said, it's an estimate at a point in time, and there's a lot of uncertainty around some of the areas. So when we was looking at the medium-term financial strategy, we was looking at a 6.7% inflation, with the pay awards for 24-25 of 5% for firefighters, 25-26 3%, and 26-27 2%. So moving on to page 31 of your pack, when we're looking at the council tax increase, if we get a 1.95%, we're kind of looking around 991,000 additional income, rising to 1.2 million if we got the 2.95. And as you can see, with the £5 increase, it rises up to 2 million, so it gives us quite a lot of different options. If you look on the pack on page 33, when we was writing the medium-term financial strategy, we was looking at the most likely case of being the £5, but obviously things have changed. So now the worst case scenario, which is the 2.95% increase, and assuming the firefighters get a 5% pay award, at the time of writing the medium-term financial strategy, we was looking at a 1.3 deficit position in 24-5, rising up to 2.5 million in 25-26. There's more detail within the report on pages 55 to 57 of these options, but the one that we're looking at the moment and focusing on is the 2.95% at the moment. So going further on into the pack, section 2.35, it does say that obviously with the funding deficit that we're anticipating at the moment, the Chief Fire Officer will be proposing savings for the Fire Authority going forward, and also we'll be looking at supporting the budget deficit this financial year with planned reserves. There's detail about the planned reserves on page 53 of the pack. So if you look at section 5.2, the estimated level of reserves is about 9.4 million, which is about 5 million reserves and 4.4 earmarked reserves. And again, there's more detail in the pack on page 80 about the reserves. The authority reviews the levels of reserves as part of the medium-term financial strategy, and the general reserve minimum level for this financial year is proposed to be put to 4.1 million for 24-25. As part of the reserve strategy as well, we've looked at all of the earmarked reserves that we've currently got and all of the balances, and reviewed these with the budget holders and what we needed to going forward. some of the earmarked reserves have actually been reprioritised into the organisation. So we're proposing that 485,000 of the earmarked reserves goes into the replacement mobilising system earmarked reserve. The replacement mobilising system has been identified as one of the areas of risk in the organisation, and obviously the additional money might be needed there. Also, we're wanting to put into another 10,000 into the efficiency programme. So part of the medium-term financial strategy, we also look at the capital programme going forward. So on the capital programme is on page 69 of the pack. This looks at affordability of the organisation for the capital, for transport, for where the appliances are and where our stations are. It looks at affordability. So this current financial year going into next financial year, the appliances, we're kind of bringing in 17 new appliances into the organisation, and we're looking at affordability as well. So going forward, we've kind of delayed the any new appliances into 29-30 just about affordability, so we can look at what our MRP and our debt ratio is. And when we talk about the 8% at the bottom, in 28-29 we're actually going into 8%, which is our debt ratio, and that's kind of like the equivalent of our mortgage repayments. So by the time we get to 28-29, the interest rates might have come down, and we might be like reprioritising and looking at the 10-year plan again. But for now, we've postponed the appliances until 29-30, so that it's affordable going forward. As part of the capital programme as well, we look about where the stations are with the fire cover review as well. The reserve strategy goes into a bit more detail on page 80, and this, when we do the reserve strategy, we look at all the risks in the organisation going forward and kind of prioritise those as well. So we kind of think that we've got enough reserves at the moment at 4.1 to take us forward into 24-25.
Thank you very much, Mark, and thank you, Tracy, and thank you to both of you for all your very hard work in a challenging circumstance, and for the report, which I think is very, very clear in the presentation that both of you have given. Are there any comments or questions from members at this point in relation to the report? Commissioner.
Thank you for that really good summary. I'm obviously comparing with the police and how we're doing our police budget, and we've been working really closely with Mark on that. In the police budget, we don't have enough money to put in for a 5% pay award. In our budget, we're budgeting for 2.5%. I would hope that our police officers get more than that, but we're at an expectation if it's more than the 2.5%, which is in our affordable budget, that gap would be filled by government. And I don't know if that's ever been used when you've been doing budgets in prior.
Mark may want to add, but so I agree with you, Commissioner, and there's a debate every year about what's the anticipated level of firefighter pay.
Yeah.
My best guess is 5%. I think there's a risk that it's higher than 5%.
Yeah.
Any move for us to go lower than 5%, I think, would be a risk in the budget from a political perspective.
Yeah.
Mark may be able to disabuse me of this if I'm wrong, but we didn't really get full funding for the pay settlement for firefighters last year from the government, and obviously firefighters' pay is funded in a slightly different way to the way that police officers' pay is funded. So if we were to underplay our hand and assume 2% or 3% and it ends up being 5 or 6, there's obviously then a significant further gap that we've got to find that is unlikely to be forthcoming in terms of the government in terms of settlement. But you are right, every year there's a debate about, and it's a guesstimate, isn't it? It's people trying to make a guesstimate about, for us, which again is a slightly different process for police pay, firefighters' pay is subject to national collective bargaining, so it's a negotiation between the employers and the employees, which is obviously slightly different to the process in terms of police.
Yeah, and just to be clear, I absolutely think it should be more than 5%.
No,
just to be really clear. But it's just
the process.
It helps with the lobbying. If you say, in our budget, we don't have enough money.
Chief?
Yeah, just on that, Commissioner, as well, each year when the negotiations start, fire authority chairs and chiefs are asked to go to consultations, and we're often asked about affordability, which I think is actually not a start point which is useful, because when you're already operating at a deficit, what you can see in the 5% is a planning assumption at this stage based on the last 2 years really, and where we think pay is relative to inflation and cost of living. So anything over 5% is another £350,000, which will be unfunded because of obviously the settlement and the £5. So if it's lower, it's good for the budget, but I suspect it's probably in the right ballpark in terms of what will go in the future, in terms of the intelligence that's coming back. So chairs do have an opportunity to kind of lobby, but of course this is part of the NJC, you know, and whatever comes out of the NJC, authorities are bound by.
And it's that, you know, and you know this, Commissioner, it's that sort of competing balances about financial sustainability, affordability, but also industrial relations. There's a very real risk, you know, in a very heavily unionised service, and because of the principle you've just talked about, and I entirely agree with, about people struggling at the moment needing to be paid properly.
Yeah.
If you budget for 2%, what message does that send to you know, to your workforce? And for us, obviously, it's a slightly different process to the one that the police follow. Mark, I don't know whether you or Tracy want to add anything further.
I think probably to reiterate what's been said, I mean, police has been in a slightly better position for the last few years because it's been a more of a protected service, and we've had that significant uplift requirement in there. And as a result of that, government have had to step in when pay awards have been higher to ensure that we've delivered on those numbers. That has been the exception. So although it's happened for the last 2 years, and there's probably a reasonable assumption that it might happen next year for us, that is not the normal planning situation that the police would find itself in. So that's why we would be normally in the same position as where fire is, that anything over and above has, you know, effectively has to be dealt with by further cuts and reductions in year. Again, it's a fine balance, isn't it? Because you could artificially put lower numbers in there and have an artificial balance, but all that would do is for me as a CFO be advising you that actually you need a bigger general fund reserve then, because there's a bigger risk, and so it becomes a zero-sum game.
Thank you.
Thank you, Caroline. Jonathan?
Yeah, no, thanks, Chair, for that. Thank you very much to the board. I know it's difficult stepping in on a temporary basis to put this together, especially in difficult times, so thank you. I mean, thinking like obviously we've got to wait to see what the settlement comes out with.
Yeah.
You know, I've had some discussion with MPs, so and they're saying what they're getting back from Home Offices, there's a reason for not the 5. So I'm hoping, especially based on the quite generous police assessment we got yesterday at the LSAP, there's a good reason for that, obviously, the conversations we had. So I know it's never nice to say a waiting game, but obviously we'll see what comes up there, and if we have to do any further work afterwards, I'm happy to work beyond that to look into that in more detail. But as I say, when we get that full plot, it will hopefully help fill out figures more. We can have a proper discussion about where we go going forwards.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you, Jonathan. Any other comments or questions? Jason?
Just quickly, on the table on page 78, the removal of earmark reserves, there's obviously this 485 which being moved around. The movement of the 350 from the mobilising system makes sense. I'm just wondering if there's any implications for any of the others, particularly, I mean, fire cover review, etc. If there's any implications for any of those other lines, and why there's that ability to move those reserves in it.
Tracy?
When we looked at those reserves, what we did was the people that were actually allocated those reserves, we had discussions with them to see whether everything that they were expecting to come out of those reserves had been used and whether that was surplus money. So we had discussions with the budget holders that have got those particular reserves, and they said that was surplus to the requirement and all the work had been done.
Okay, thank you.
And obviously there's that dilemma we face about the mobilising system, you know, and the cost that are there, and the need to align our reserves to where, you know, where the priorities are and where we need to be funded. But as Tracy says, it was part of a proper exercise where budget holders were consulted, and there was a review of each individual reserve. Tom?
Yeah, just obviously, I suppose a simple point, which I'm not really used to seeing in these papers, is even in the worst case scenario, we're anticipating to raise council tax. So I assume it's taken as a given that the authority will be raising the council tax by the maximum.
So every time we have a medium-term financial strategy, and I don't think this is dissimilar to City Council, County Council, Ashfield, there is a financial assumption made in the medium-term financial strategy. The recommendations are crystal clear, though, in this medium-term financial strategy. That is a decision for the authority to take. So there'll be a two-stage process, Tom, for that. There'll be a recommendation from Finance and Resources Committee in the early new year, post the settlement, as Jonathan says, when we've got the actual figures, and then a recommendation will come back here. So there's no decision taken, but obviously there needs to be an assumption made about what the different scenarios are. If you want my personal view about this, and we're not at the budget yet, and we haven't had the settlement, it'll come next week, or the 19th of December, I would be highly surprised, given the discussions we've had previously, Finance and Resources wasn't suggesting a council tax increase, and I would be highly surprised if it wasn't a increase to the maximum level. And obviously any decision not to do that, which the assumptions show you here, would just push a further problem along the medium-term financial plan in terms of widening that deficit. It would go up beyond the 1.3 to whatever the figure would be. It talks about how much it is per percent. So that's, there's no decision been taken. A debate needs to happen in Finance and Resources Committee, I did last year, and then there'll be a debate in here and a vote about it in the budget. I hope that we can get to a position, which we've got to previously, where we've got political consensus, not just over precept, but over the budget, because I think it's in everybody's interest. It's an emergency service that covers the city and the county. It affects all of our communities. But it's an assumption at this stage, Tom. It's not a decision that's been made.
So obviously, just with the maximum increase being included in the worst case scenario, I'd suggest probably be a further worst case scenario should the committee decide not to raise council tax.
A valid point, yeah. And that is a distinct possibility, it's subject to a debate and a vote here at the budget meeting. Tom, are you happy?
Yeah.
Yeah. Callum?
Thank you, Chair. Just to, I think, echo Jonathan's point about we'll get some further news on that, and hopefully it's good news. It just looks like we're going to be the worst case scenario. I think we've got to almost work on that basis. Which is why I think that Finance and Resources Committee meeting will be extremely important. And I'm aware that as part of the recommendation, we are tasking the Finance and Resources Committee to look at it. I think a big thing actually therefore will be looking at our estimated spend, and hopefully that Finance and Resources Committee meeting will at least get an idea of if there are going to be kind of look at some of the proposals then. I'm aware that last year, I believe, I myself abstained because of that Finance and Resources Committee, because we had the recommendation to increase council tax, but I don't believe the other proposals to go with it weren't including that Finance Subcommittee. So hopefully this time round we can have some more information on that to get that full picture of that recommendation.
I mean, I agree with your point, Callum. I would just gently point out that there are very few areas left in the service to cut other than frontline services, and I think the irony of the process that was followed last year is that there weren't proposals on the table at that point because there was a consultation around how to save money. That consultation came out, and there were people in this authority who then took an opportunity to campaign against those proposals elsewhere. So for me, you can't have your cake and eat it. You can't on the one hand ask for proposals to come forward to save money and think it's a sensible idea to do that and want to vote for it in an authority, and then go outside and politically campaign against it and blame the Labour-led authority for the fact that there had to be frontline service cuts. I've already said very, very clearly in the Chair's announcements that if there isn't a change of heart, and I wouldn't view good news from the government as being no change of heart. If there isn't a change of heart over the council tax flexibility, we will be in a position, make no mistake about it, where there will have to be a consideration by this authority about frontline service cuts again, which will either result in stations or appliances being considered to be removed. There isn't a pot of money elsewhere in the authority that can be taken out of the authority budget. So, if people want to see proposals coming forward about how we could take money out of the budget, that's fine. But if they're going to vote for them in here and want to vote for them in here, it's no good voting for them here on the one hand and then the next week going out and distributing leaflets saying that they don't support them to the community, because that is exactly what happened last year. Any other comments or questions that people want to ask in terms of the medium-term financial strategy? No? I'll move the recommendations then, which are that members approve the medium-term financial strategy as set out in Appendix A, that we approve the capital strategy and flexible use of capital receipts strategy contained within the medium-term financial strategy, that we approve the reserve strategy contained within the medium-term financial strategy, that we approve the proposed minimum level of general fund reserves as referenced by Tracy of £4.1 million as set out in the reserve strategy, that we approve the reallocation of earmarked reserves as detailed in the reserve strategy and as set out in the table on page 28 in our pack, which has already been referenced by Councillor Zadrozny in his question, that we task, as Councillor Bailey has made reference to, the Finance and Resources Committee with providing guidance to the Fire Authority in February in respect of two items: the options for council tax limited to either a council tax increase of 2.95% or an increase of £5 if permitted, which we won't obviously know for definite until the local government finance settlement is announced in the House of Commons on the 19th of December, I think it is, or round about that date. And that the second element that we tasked the Finance and Resources Committee to bring back to Fire Authority in February is in respect of the options for addressing any budget deficit to enable the Fire Authority to approve a balanced budget, which is obviously a matter of requirement by law. I'll move the recommendations. Somebody happy to second them?
Second.
They're seconded by the Vice Chair. Given that this relates to finance, I'm going to ask for a show of hands vote. All those in favour of the recommendations? All those against the recommendations? Any abstentions? That was carried unanimously. Thank you, colleagues, for your questions and for the debate on what is an important issue. Item 6 is linked to item 5, really, and colleagues are familiar with seeing this paper, which is our Treasury Management Mid-Year Review for 23-24. It's a report of the Treasurer, Mark, so I'll hand over to you to speak to this item.
Thank you. This is an update report, so it's recommendations to note the report. Treasury management in its entirety merges cash flow forecasting with long-term borrowing and investment decisions. You'll see in there our economic forecasts. That helps us assess the future cash flow needs, as well as looks at what market sentiment is about where future interest rates may be, and again, that assists us in long-term borrowing decisions. Rates are currently generally higher than the historic norm, and therefore the advice would be, wherever possible, to avoid any long-term borrowing. And you've seen that effectively take place in the earlier report, where we talked about pushing out some of those capital requirements on that affordability ratios numbers on that table, where we tend to be starting to hit that 8% maximum. So again, that's all sensible approach. Sometimes you can't afford to do long-term borrowing, but at the moment we are in that situation. As an organisation, we generally have positive cash flow forecast. That means we have more money in our bank account that we need to spend. So we do short-term and long-term investments in line with our advice from our Treasury advisors, which is linked. You'll see in some of our monitoring reports that this year we've got extra income coming in through Treasury management activities around about £200,000. It would have been nice, 200 million. And again, that sort of will be reflected in the base estimate position for next year. And I suspect that we'll be in that position for a short to medium period of time. Towards the end of our medium-term planning cycle, the expectation is that interest rates will drop towards the market norms. So that's probably a short-term benefit to us in the budget, but it will only be a short-term benefit. The report shows you that we brought for each none of the potential indicators, so all of the controls that you set in place for Tracy and her team in terms of day-to-day management, none of those have been breached, and we're not recommending any changes to them at the moment. And that's the report. At this moment, at the time of the report, we've got just over £15.5 million invested, and that's shown on page 99 on Appendix B, if you want to know exactly where our cash was held at that point in time.
Thank you, Mark. Very helpful. Any comments or questions for Mark on the paper? No? I'll move the recommendation then, which is that members note the update on Treasury management activity during 2023-24 financial year as required under the Local Government Act 2003. Somebody happy to second the recommendation? That's seconded by the Vice Chair. All those in favour? All those against? Any abstentions? That's carried unanimously. Thank you, colleagues. Thank you, Mark. Item 7 then is appointment of the Assistant Chief Fire Officer, which is on page 101 to 104, and this is going to be introduced by the Chief Fire Officer on my behalf.
Thank you, Chair. Morning, members. First thing I kind of want to sort of say is my recognition and thanks of ACFO candidate Brudenell on her service to Nottinghamshire Fire and Rescue Service. Leadership team had an away day and development day yesterday where we did our thanks for Canada as being a colleague. And I said yesterday, you know, Canada has become a friend, colleague and mentor to me personally. And I just want to kind of put that on record in terms of the impact that Canada's had as a strategic leader in this organisation, and what she's achieved for the service and the legacy she'll leave is absolutely huge. And you know, it's not measurable on a kind of like a metric or anything else, but the legacy she's going to leave is going to be absolutely massive. So I just want to put on record my personal thanks to Canada for the support she's given to the Fire Authority. I hope that members will recognise that and support to me as a Chief Fire Officer. Following Canada's notice in terms of retirement then, Authority Appointments Committee was established really to look at, because it is your authority appointment and it's subject to your approval today. It is a recommendation from the Appointments Committee. We used an external provider, Real World HR, that we've used previously, and that is really to give us a bigger reach out into the marketplace in terms of getting talent to come forward. It was really pleasing to say, I think we had about 18 people in terms of a long list originally that expressed an interest, and we got down to a short list of 5 candidates. Unfortunately, a couple of external candidates pulled out along the way, and hopefully through a debrief process we'll find out what was the reasons for that. Regardless of that though, we got 3 candidates through to the Appointments Committee, and as an observer of that process it was really great to see the high level of quality that all candidates came into the room, and hopefully that members will be part of that will also support that view as well. Through all that process, the paper talks about the robustness of the process. Clearly there's an application process and long listing that candidates go through. They then come through and they do a media interview, they do a strategic decision-making exercise. So on this occasion it was a business continuity exercise that affects the organisation, so a significant internal event that takes place in the organisation, and the candidates have to work through in terms of managing the organisation and managing even sort of political interactions, whether it be with the chair of the Fire Authority or members themselves. They do the media side of it. They then have to do a presentation. This year's presentation that candidates had to do focused on improving the culture of the Fire and Rescue Service, and particularly Nottinghamshire's culture, so it was very contemporary issue. And then of course it culminates in the presentation of that report to the Appointments Committee, and then questions and answer sessions with members. You know, from a very proud perspective as well, the 2 candidates that are named in there are both of your internal candidates, you know, and it's really refreshing to see how they stack up against external competence and skills and expertise. The paper obviously then goes to the recommendations. And the first recommendation is to appoint Michael Sharman as your substantive Assistant Chief Fire Officer. Mick has been temporary in post. He's been in the post in service when Damien West got the role last time, and he's also been doing that joint collaborative role between ourselves and Derbyshire Fire and Rescue Service. So first recommendation is really to appoint Mick as your substantive Assistant Chief Officer. That will be effective from the 15th of January, when Canada's last date of employment with the authority is the 14th. And because of the process and we're working with Derbyshire, we need to kind of do something in the interim for about a 4-month period. And the recommendation in the paper, and there is a typo in the recommendation section on the front page, the names are right, is to replace Area Manager Berry as temporary Assistant Chief Fire Officer for a 4-month period. So the recommendation on the front of the report is correct in the recommendation section, and we'll send an updated paper through to the Clerk Secretariat's office to make sure the updated paper does actually be the one that gets published. So fairly straightforward, very proud moment for me as the Chief Fire Officer to be part of the observation of the process and the quality of the candidates coming through was absolutely exceptional. There is some learning there as well. We've got to find out why did external candidates decide to pull out along the way. But I suspect that it has been incredibly good to kind of beat the competition that hopefully members saw on the day. So I'll leave it there, Chair.
Superb, thank you, Chief. And I'd just like to start by echoing my personal thanks, and I think I can speak on behalf of the entire authority, to ACFO candidate Brudenell, who's been an absolutely outstanding officer, senior officer, and has given absolutely brilliant service to Nottinghamshire Fire and Rescue Service. I think your exemplary service, candidate, vindicates entirely the decision this authority took to have the confidence to say that we were going to appoint an ACFO that didn't have to come from within professional frontline service within the fire sector. I think you've brought real significant added value to the service. You've massively changed the culture. For me, personal moment of pride to see that we've had a female ACFO has made a real difference, not just here in the service, but alongside our partners as well. And your particular focus in the service, although this underplays the achievements you've made with us, your particular focus in the service on equality, diversity and inclusion, for me, I think has been absolutely exceptional. And I know in the members of staff that I speak to the difference that you've made, and I know just how much you deeply care about Nottingham and Nottinghamshire, and I think you've been absolutely brilliant, and we'll miss you massively, Candida. And to that end, I just would like to add an additional recommendation before the two recommendations, that members place on record our thanks to ACFO Candida Brudenell for her outstanding service to Nottinghamshire Fire and Rescue Service. So we'll add in that additional recommendation to formally thank Candida for your brilliant work, and we wish you very well, Candida. We will miss you. Keep in touch. And I know you've got lots more to contribute to Nottingham and Nottinghamshire. You're very proud of this community, and I think you've done a brilliant job, so thank you. As the Chief says as well, it was really, really nice. I think I can speak for the cross-party appointments panel to have 3 very good candidates, 2 outstanding candidates internally. Mick will do an absolutely brilliant job. Anybody who's worked with Mick knows just how much he cares about the Fire and Rescue Service. He's a man of deep, deep integrity and honesty, which to me is very important in public service. He cares deeply about the role we play as members in our communities, and I know he goes out of the way to brief members when there are incidents in our areas or issues that he knows that we're passionate about. And his professionalism and expertise, I think, precedes him, his reputation. He will be brilliant in the role of an Assistant Chief Fire Officer. And likewise, it is absolutely worth making reference to that Area Manager Leela Berry was brilliant in the interview process, absolutely brilliant, and has got a very, very shining future, I think, in the Fire and Rescue Service, or indeed any other emergency service. She very much impressed the panel, and I'm absolutely delighted that she's accepted taking up the Temporary Assistant Chief Officer role. I think it's a very good development opportunity for her, and I think she's got a very bright future ahead of her, and I know she'll do a very good job for us in the role as well. So it was really nice to be part of that process and to see 2 internal candidates really shine. So they are the recommendations, with the additional recommendation that I've added. Does anybody else want to raise any comments or questions? Jonathan?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Again, just to place on record, thanks to Candida for what you've done on your service, and wish you all the best going forwards, and to obviously welcome Mick back to the role, so to speak, and obviously later as well. So, having spoken to Ed a few times in various BCFERs now, how she's come on and in terms of the contribution she's made to the fire service, so we look forward to seeing what she can do for us over the few months in that role. And like I say, it's really refreshing to see 2 internal candidates who come through that. Actually just shows the organisation itself, and obviously to have people who come through the organisation to get to that level where they can be at that final stage, as the Chief said. Also, I think to thank the members who have been on these panels, because they're all day session, and actually when you've got their own commitment to the other councils as well. I do know, I've been on them before, it's a very long day and quite intensive day as well, and quite a bit of pressure as well, with someone's like career in your hands, so to speak, and the future service. So my place, so thanks to those people in that committee as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan. Any comments or questions? Councillor Butler?
Yeah, just to add, I was on the panel, and it's obviously a stressful day for the candidates, but I have to say as well, it's quite stressful for the panel, because as Jonathan says, we're making very important decisions, and we're affecting people's lives, both internally, the candidates, but ultimately for the authority. And so, yeah, long, busy day, and I think we made the right decision. as has been said, all three candidates were excellent, but it is nice that we had the two really good internal ones as well. So, yeah, good exercise.
Thank you, Councillor Butler. Echo Jonathan's point. The panel did a very, very good job, and it is a long day, but it was really nice, actually. And the cross-party panel, people bring different expertise to that panel, so it's always a really good good process. So thank you to everybody who was involved in that process. I'll move the recommendations unless anybody else wants to add anything else. So I'll move the recommendations with the additional recommendation. Somebody happy to second the recommendations?
Yes, second.
Seconded by the Vice Chair. All those in favour? All those against? Any abstentions? That was carried. They were carried unanimously. Thank you, colleagues. Damien, do you want to welcome Mick back? Congratulations, Mick, on your appointment as Assistant Chief Fire Officer. Unanimous decision by the authority, and I think everybody is really looking forward to taking on the substantive role and knows you're going to do an absolutely brilliant job, as you have done for this service over very many years. And if Area Manager Leila Berry is listening, a massive congratulations as well to you, Leila. I know you're going to do a brilliant job in that appointment for us, and you really shone in the interview process. So well done to Leila as well. Congratulations, Mick and Leila.
Thank you.
Okay, colleagues, item 8 is appointment of the Treasurer and Head of Finance to the authority, which is on page 105, 108, and again, the Chief's going to introduce this on my behalf.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Members will be aware that obviously without your finance papers have been introduced by the Treasurer, Mark Kimberley and Tracy. Again, my thanks as Chief Officer for the way that certainly the conversation I had with the Chief Constable around the arrangements and making sure that was dealt with quickly, and Mark stepping in. He's already got a big job as it is, so actually stepping in there, I think it needs some recognition. I know it's an interim period, and it's good that you can probably see the end of it, but you know, Mark's advice to me and the conversations I've had with Mark as well has been really, really useful, and he has held us to account as well over a couple of things. So just to give members thing, he's not doing it temporarily, he's definitely doing it, which is really useful. And to Tracy as well, stepping up as Head of Finance until we have our new Head of Finance and new Treasurer in place. The work that she's doing with the strategic leadership team, even as late as yesterday, has been absolutely immense. So thank you to you both for the support you're providing. Again, it was a member's appointment back when Becky left us in early November. Candidates coming through, again we had external support to try and make sure we got a good crop through. It is particularly problematic in the finance arena as well, I would sort of say, in the public sector. There isn't lots of people out there in the sector as well, and that is something through fire sector, but both across local authority as well. These kind of individuals with the right level of competence and experience, which you will need as an authority, given the challenges that will continue. But I have to say, the appointment recommendation is to appoint Beverly Bull as your Head of Finance and Treasurer. I've had a couple of keep in touch conversations. I had one earlier this week with Bev. All the paperwork and vetting and everything else is now in place, and Bev has returned a signed contract of employment. I know we're on YouTube, and I don't know if her current employees know all about that or not, but it's now live on YouTube. And without giving notice, but this is a public meeting for transparency, and that is first and foremost. So there are two recommendations, members. One is to accept and endorse the recommendation from your appointments committee to appoint Bev to the role, and to also endorse the service level agreement between ourselves and police that allows Mark to be your interim treasurer. And in the paper just says we've got a provisional start date of the 4th of March for Bev joining us. And I know Bev is trying to watch YouTube, she's trying to look at papers online and everything else, and I certainly know Tracy and the team in finance are filling an inbox of all useful information as part of their induction. So I'll end there, Chair.
Thank you very much, Chief. Thank you to the panel as well for their involvement in this process. Bev was brilliant in the interviews. I think she's going to do a really good job for us as Head of Finance, Treasurer. I think Councillor Drossen, she served at Ashfield previously, so yourself and Councillor Hollis will be be aware of her professionalism and her good work, and we're really looking forward to welcoming her. Minor amendment, the second recommendation should be to approve the recommendation of the Appointments Committee, not endorse, to specifically approve the recommendation, and actually probably to approve the service level agreement as well instead of endorse. Just to again say thank you, Mark, to you, and a specific thank you to Tracy for the hard work that you're doing. It's very, very much appreciated, and thank you to the police and also to Commissioner Henry for your support as well in loaning Mark to us. He's doing a good job. Commissioner.
Mark is exceptional, and I have to say, in the spirit of partnership and working together, you are getting in for a bargain.
We've got no money, Caroline, so we're very, very grateful. And, you know, important, because the synergy between the two services and the collaboration between the two services is really important. Callum?
I'd just like to echo, I was one of those on the panel, and it was a very informative day. And as has been alluded to, these points are extremely important, not just for the candidates, but also for the wider Nottinghamshire area. I'd also like to place my thanks as well to Mark and Tracy for stepping up. Very much appreciated from, I think, everyone here.
Thank you, Callum. Any other comments or questions? I'll move the two recommendations with the two minor amendments. Seconded by the Vice Chair. All those in favour? All those against? Any abstentions? They're carried unanimously. Thank you, colleagues. Item 9 is going to be introduced by the Clerk, Principal Officer Pay Review.
Thank you, Chair. This is a fairly straightforward report. Every 2 years we undertake a benchmarking exercise against what we call the Family Comparator Group to check that our Principal Officer Pay is in the right territory. On this occasion, we went out to 15 authorities within the group and 12 responded. And the view is that the pay is in the right territory, and the recommendation is therefore that there should be no change to the existing arrangements. I also would like to thank Tracy Crump for the work she's undertaken in relation to pulling all the information together, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Clerk, and echo the point about thanking Tracy. I think the recommendation is pretty straightforward. It's a process that we've followed, I think, since 2014. Every 2 years, I think, as the Clerk has explained previously, so people know the process. The recommendation is straightforward. It's a no change in terms of the position. Are there any comments or questions that we want to raise? If not, I'll move the recommendation.
Second.
That's seconded by the Vice Chair. All those in favour? All those against? Any abstentions? I think that was unanimous. Did I see everybody voting in favour? I think I did. Okay, that was unanimous. Thank you. The next item is the Environmental and Sustainability Policy Statement, which is on page 117 to 122. Colleagues are familiar with this. I think it comes back to us every year for refresh and recommitment, and this is going to be introduced by ACFO Damien West.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, members. As the Chair's mentioned, this is the annual refresh of the Services Environment and Sustainability Policy Statement. You'll be aware that environmental sustainability is an important part of our Community Risk Management Plan and the CRMP that members have endorsed, and we're currently looking at going into year 3 of that. You will notice that the presentation of this is slightly later this year, and that's because we took the opportunity to refresh the statement and under the Chief Fire Officer to give it a real purpose and personal commitment in terms of our commitments around environmental sustainability. And the main body of this is in the appendix, where you see the policy statement itself. Members will notice that it's taken a much more personal approach this time. It is signed by the Chair of the Fire Authority and the Chief Fire Officer and endorsed by the trade unions. And it gives a commitment not only to what we want to achieve within the next year, where we'll review our position statements on a number of key areas which are listed, but also really sets out our ambition to ensure that environmental sustainability is at the forefront of our decision making and that we maintain our commitment to minimising our impact as an organisation. I think as a fire and rescue service we see even very regularly, most recently, the impact of environmental change. So I think it's a really important thing that we have this statement, that we adhere to it, and we keep that in our forethought as we make decisions. So thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Damien. Any comments or questions? Caroline?
Thank you. Just a little one. On page 121, you've actually got the policy statement dated November 2023, but at the bottom it says November 2022.
Oh, yeah. It says this version replaces dated July, but actually it should say 23, shouldn't it? That first date. Yeah.
See, I can read it, is there?
Thank you, Caroline.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Any other comments or questions? Nope. Recommendation is that members endorse the policy statement to reaffirm their commitment to matters relating to the environment and sustainability. I'll move the recommendation. Seconded by the Vice Chair. All those in favour? All those against? Any abstentions? That was carried unanimously. Thank you, colleagues. Item 11 is the health and safety policy statement of intent, and again this is on page 123 of our pack. This is going to be introduced by Damien.
Thank you again, Chair. So this is to fulfil our requirement, our statutory requirement to have a health and safety policy, and a key part of that is the statement of intent, which is updated and presented to you again today with the correct date on this one. So I'll just check that. The statement of intent is brought before authority each year to be endorsed, and again members will see that this has taken a bit of a refresh and a much more personalised and focused approach. The requirement is for the most senior person within the organisation, so for us, the Chief Fire Officer, to set out their statement of intent and their commitment to ensuring the health, safety and welfare of all of our employees. You'll be aware that we have a broad provision to make sure that we keep our firefighters but also all members of staff safe in their places of work. And this statement sets out the commitment of the Chief Fire Officer, countersigned by the Chair of the Fire Authority and supported by the trade unions in terms of honouring that commitment. This statement highlights that we won't only meet our statutory requirements, but we'll go above and beyond to make sure that health, safety and welfare is of paramount importance within the organisation. Members will be aware that our firefighters face a number of risks in their day-to-day execution of their duties, but we have a commitment to making sure we minimise those risks wherever possible to make sure that we can safely deliver our services to communities. The statement sets out the commitment of the Chief Fire Officer and the authority, and also the expectations of managers and staff within the organisation in order to maintain a place which is safe to work. So the statement itself is in the appendix. Again, Chair, happy to take any questions. Let's see your overview of that.
Thank you, Damien. Caroline?
I'm sorry, I'm being pedantic on dates ago, excuse me, but as this is brought to us to approve today, should the date not be December rather than November?
We'll change it, Councillor. Commissioner Smith.
Because we're saying we approve it. So.
Good point. Any other comments or questions? We're asked to endorse the content of the updated statement of intent to reaffirm our commitment to effective health and safety risk management for employees and others who are affected by the services activities. I'll move the recommendation.
Second.
All those in favour? All those against? Any abstentions? That was carried unanimously. Thank you, colleagues. Item 12 is the implementation of resourcing to risk, also known as Ashfield, which is going to be introduced, I think, by Damien. It's on page 129 to 134 of our pack. Damien?
Thank you, Chair. So members will be aware that over the last 12 months almost, we have been working to reinstate the 24-hour whole-time crewing at Ashfield as part of our wider resourcing to risk project workstream. So members received the last update in September 2023, and I am pleased to say that at 7 a.m. on the 29th of November, Ashfield Fire Station returned to 24-hour whole-time crewing on time as planned as part of that project. The project has taken a lot of hard work and coordination across the organisation, but a proactive approach with both the workforce, with trade unions and internal and external stakeholders has meant that we were able to deliver those changes on time and in time with the planned projection. Throughout the whole process, this implemented changes across the whole organisation in order to return the 2 extra watches at Ashfield within the current establishment. That meant an impact on over 30 people within the operational workforce. However, I think it's credit to the proactive approach of managers within the team who've delivered this, and also engagement with individuals and the trade unions, that we managed to facilitate all of those changes without any grievances being raised within the organisation, and with a really proactive approach through the workforce. So my thanks to everyone that was involved in that. Members will be aware that when we presented the proposals in July and then September of this year, the ability to facilitate the change to Ashfield was dependent on the ridership, so the number of firefighters that we have in the organisation being at an appropriate level. So concerted efforts have been made in terms of improving the number of firefighters we have within the service, including transferees from other fire and rescue services and the support for on-call firefighters who are currently with ourselves and employed in whole-time employment with another fire and rescue service to join us here in Nottinghamshire for their whole-time employment. A lot of work has gone into that across a number of departments, and I'm pleased to say that those firefighters are now working with us, and we have a greater level of ridership across the organisation. On top of that, we are on track to recruit a large number of trainee firefighters, with up to 20 firefighters scheduled to join us in April next year, and that is on top of current 12 firefighters who are finalising their training and are due to come to stations in January. So a real effort in terms of bringing the number of firefighters up to our established maximum over the next 12 months. Members will also be aware that as part of the changes, there are 4 posts which are being reallocated from the operational ridership to support the delivery of other areas within the organisation and within the commitments of the Community Risk Management Plan, the CRMP. And those roles will be moving in January of next year when we get the intake of the next trainee course. And they will be focusing on supporting our Services and Quality Action Plan, service improvement and operational preparedness, particularly in terms of high-risk, high-rise buildings. As mentioned, and it's detailed in 2.7 of the report, there are plans to take a large intake of new firefighters next year, and as of today, those applicants are finishing their job-related tests. Going into this stage of recruitment, we had 317 applicants who had passed the fitness stage of selection. Concerted effort has gone into making sure that we have a representative workforce and a representative cohort of applicants from across that group, with huge commitment from the service to reach out to all communities and make sure they understand that the fire service is a career for them. That's resulted in the current cohort consisting of 9% female candidates and 14% BAME candidates from the public applications that we've received so far. Just to touch back on the changes as a wider resource into risk chair, as reported to the September Fire Authority, we have put a number of mitigations in place in order to address the higher frequency when appliances will be crewed with 4 personnel. They've included refreshed incident command training, a review of degradation procedures, and incorporating crewing of 4 into our training scenarios. Furthermore, we have an in-depth range of evaluation criteria which we want to monitor the change to Ashfield, but also across the wider ridership over the next 12 months in particular. Those reports and that monitoring will form part of our standard reporting to the Community Safety Committee to make sure that scrutiny and transparency is applied within those. So overall, a really positive project that was delivered, and again, my thanks to everyone that's been involved in delivering that. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Damien. And just before I open it to comments and questions, just particularly on the report, obviously touches on wider issues than just the resource into risk issue at Ashfield Station, but I just want to say on behalf of the authority, a particular thank you to the staff, particularly the staff who have been personally affected by the transfer move around, but a particular thank you to the staff who are now servicing the community of Ashfield and and surrounds, including obviously the wider city and county, but particular thanks to our trade unions as well for the way that they have engaged in the issue. I'm absolutely acutely aware that this has not been without its concerns and legitimate concerns in my view, but I appreciate the constructive way in which the trade unions have engaged in this conversation. That's always the approach taken by our principal officers here and by the authority, and I'm very grateful, Mark, to you and others for the way that you've engaged in the discussion. A particular thank you to the Chief Fire Officer, who obviously was tasked with trying to resolve quite a difficult issue given the financial challenge, and to his team, specifically Damien, who I know has helped steward this process, but the managers involved as well, and everybody involved with making this work. And just from my perspective, a particular thank you to the authority, which includes the Commissioner as well, for the way in which people have engaged in this conversation constructively. We've followed the evidence, we've followed the figures, we've followed the numbers in terms of the review that was taken, and we've arrived at the right decision. And just specifically in the way that I have done previously, where we've had communities specifically affected by changes in the service, I thank you to Jason and to Tom for the way you've engaged in the issue constructively and shown community leadership. Obviously this is your locality, and I know you both feel very passionately about the issue, so thank you for the way that you've engaged in the discussion and the debate about this, and for patience and forbearance of the Ashfield community in getting to the right place, and wish the team very well who are working there, and thank them. Certainly I saw in the response from the community that it was very positive from the community in terms of where we've arrived at, so thank you to everybody involved with that. Are there any comments or questions people want to make? Councillor Zadrozny?
Thank you, Chair. I think you'd be surprised if I didn't. I mean, really, just to echo many of your comments, I think it's not often in councils or local government when you're not in charge of an organisation where you feel like you can make a positive difference. And I think this is one of those few times where I really think that, as you say, by collaboration, by presenting a real case, real evidence, and the concerns of the residents of Ashfield, that we've made a real difference. And I appreciate entirely how difficult that's been for in the financial situation that the authority faces, from a staffing perspective and all of those other things. Notwithstanding the wider service, reinstating Ashfield to 24/7 was the right thing to do. It was essential. And Ashfield, from my mind, has always been an important strategic station. It services a huge corridor of the motorway, the A38, a number of businesses. It's on the border of other districts and the city. It services one of the biggest hospitals in the country. It's across the road from the biggest secondary school in Europe. It's a very important station. So having it back full-time is incredibly important, and I'm very thankful, as you say, to senior officers, to firefighters on the front line, to the unions who have all pulled together to make this work, despite the challenges around the wider situation of funding these projects and having staff in the right places to serve us as we need. And I just want to place my thanks that we've got to this point. A few years ago, when we had some tussle of words about that decision when it was first made, I never thought we'd be at this point. And as you know, Ashfield Station is smack in the middle of my division, so I know it all well. Damien and I were joking about the pond a little bit ago. I went to Ashfield School. I remember the work around the pond when I was a child, and I know what an important community as it is. And I know Damien's now working with our officers at Ashfield Council to make it a safe space as well. So I think this is the right thing to do. I'm incredibly thankful. And as you say, Chair, the residents of Ashfield are very thankful. They have been patient. There's been a lot of community nervousness about some premature fire deaths in the past, and whether that was a factor or not, but people always worry. And I think this has done a lot to alleviate their concerns, and I'm very, very grateful to the service that we've got where we want. I think this is really important, and it shows from your perspective that this is a listening and flexible authority that tries to put resource where it's most needed. And I've been on this authority since 2009 actually, and this is the first time I've seen that really happen, and I'm just as grateful as I can be, so thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Zadrozny. Councillor Upton?
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I agree with the point recently made that there are perhaps wider issues than just the Ashfield Fire Station. I'm pleased to hear that they're going to be monitoring those wider changes such as ridership, although I would hope that there'll be a report come back to us in about 12 months' time or something like that to look back how it's panned out on a wider basis.
Thank you, Councillor Upson. There's a commitment to a review subject to the last discussion we had in authority, so we'll make sure that happens, Councillor Upson. That's obviously a matter of public record and we'll make sure that happens. And obviously, as you say, there are wider issues, not just the issue of Ashfield, so a point well made, and we'll make sure that isn't lost sight of, Roger. Councillor Turner?
Yeah, this is early days in the project and the scheme. Can we just keep an eye on it by retaining it on the agenda?
Yeah, of course. Captured, I think, by Councillor Upton's point. Thank you, Councillor Turner. Any other comments or questions colleagues want to make? Sorry, Councillor Hollis.
Yeah, just really, I want to echo what Councillor Grosney said, but really say thank you to Damien for everything he's done with this project particularly. I mean, it's really mammoth task, which it's easy to say you've got a political commitment to wanting to open the fire station full time, but of course you've got to make sure, as quite right has been stated, the staff and the unions and everybody is supportive. And I will take it that at least 30 people that have moved their day-to-day activities with actually say how great Ashfield is. And that's how, I mean, I'd suggest the whole workforce probably wants to work out of Ashfield Fire Station. But I was really pleased by that. But then on a slightly more serious note, I hope the authority reflects on choices, because there's no getting around the fact that we've had, just in the last 18 months, 12 months, we've had 3 fatalities in house fires, literally one of them only round the corner from the fire station, all of them which Ashfield would have been the first responders, and all of which the first engine to reach them wasn't from Ashfield because it wasn't full time. Not to mention the recent stats, was something like 3 dozen that have died within 5 motorway junctions of the junction 28, which of course Ashfield Station would be the first responder on the M1 there. I really think you can never guesstimate, but this will certainly save lives, make people feel safer as number one. And as quite rightly Jason said, it is such a strategic location, not only for Sutton, Kirkby, even Hucknall, but certainly Mansfield and Junction 28 of the M1 as well. And then there's kind of a tertiary thing as well. Let's not forget how close it is to the Derbyshire border. And of course there's already rumours going around that Alfreton Station will be closing. I trust that we can offer some support to cross-border as well, to hopefully improve our relations with neighbouring authorities as well. So I certainly think opening Ashfield Fire Station 24 hours will have a massive positive effect for the authority, but largely for the community of Ashfield and the member Faultway, Mr. Drosnes for Kirkby. Just those 2 communities just feel safer. And the amount I've had more, believe it or not, Chairman, I've had more calls about the fire station reopening than I have potholes over the last month. So that says something. And I'm really pleased with this authority's work, particularly David. I'm excited to see actually the positive effect it'll have on the community going forward. Thank you.
I'll send some of my pothole calls your way, Tom. You take some of my,
He was exaggerating.
You take some of my work, though. Look, you've made the point strongly in here, Tom, and you've made the point previously. I suppose from my perspective, all I can say, and I think I can speak for the Chief when I say this, notwithstanding the decisions that were taken previously, I was crystal clear in the last fire cover review that I would follow the evidence as the chair of this authority and try and steward the authority into a position where we did follow the evidence. That was absolutely where the chief of the chief fire officer was as well. That was the right thing to do. It was difficult. It needed the political will, but it also needed the managerial and leadership backing and support to get us to the right place, as well as obviously the community support, and we've ended up in the right place. The evidence was very clear, and my view very clearly was that we shouldn't ignore the evidence. You know, it's a privilege to sit in this position of chair of the authority, and we should never ever be making decisions based on what is right to do politically or otherwise. We should follow the evidence, and the evidence spoke very loudly and very clearly on this issue, and notwithstanding the financial pressures, we needed to get to the right position, and we have got to the right position thanks to everybody's support.
But I should probably say actually, we actually had a house fire in my division only on Tuesday, I think for the first time in 4 years, 5 years, the first station to get the first clients to get there was from Nottinghamshire, not from Derbyshire. So I was quite pleased with that. So we did have some problems getting down the road because of parked cars, but we were the first one there, which was great. And yeah, also good, also good.
Okay, any other comments or questions from colleagues? No? We're asked to note the contents of the report and noted the points that Councillor Upton and Councillor Turner have made as well. So I'll move the recommendations. Seconded by the Vice Chair. All those in favour? All those against? Any abstentions? That was carried unanimously, colleagues. Thank you. Thank you, Damien, for introducing the report. Item 13, there's no business to consider. The committee outcomes are going to come as a bundle to the next for Fire Authority as a pack, so there's nothing to deal with in terms of item 13, which takes us to item 14, which is exclusion of the public. So we're to consider excluding the public from the meeting during consideration of the remaining items in accordance with section 100A of the Local Government Act 1972 under Schedule 12A Part 1 on the basis that, having regard to all the circumstances, the public interest in maintaining an exemption outweighs the public interest in disclosing the information. I'll move the recommendation. Somebody happy to second? Seconded. All those in... Welcome, John. All those in... We're just on the final item, John. We're just going into exempt session. All those in favour of the recommendation to go into closed session? All those against? Any abstentions? That was agreed unanimously. So the final